Today we have a legend of the game joining us, Steve Dawson, a name you might already know if you've been following the pickleball scene. So Steve's been a real innovator in the game, and now he's stepping into a new chapter with the launch of his brand Avoura and their debut paddle. The Rhapsody is already turning some heads. You might be able to see why. Steve, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome, Joseph. Glad to be here.
Okay, well, we got to start with the name. I love brand names. Where did the name Avoura come from?
It comes from a couple different roots of words from different languages. The first, I believe, is avoir. It's a French root. It means to have, to hold, to cherish. And then aura, which means, the aura surrounding someone. So when you link them together, it means that you have in your hand something that produces a beautiful aura around you.
Well, very cool. What led you to want to start a company? And then what ultimately led to this paddle right here?
I would say we wanted to start a company because I spent many years designing paddles for another company, and my wife had recently been inducted into the Pickleball Hall of Fame. And a couple years before that, my son won the World Professional Pickleball Championships down in Florida. And my game, I'm going to be 64 this year. I can sort of hold my own a little bit, but I'm not at the peak that I once was. And I just thought if there's ever going to be a time to start a company, we might as well do it while myself and my family are still very involved in playing and competing. So I thought now's the time.
I love it. Can you tell us a little bit about the Rhapsody and what's its story? It's definitely a little bit different.
The inspiration of the shape of the Rhapsody, which everyone is going to look at and say, what the heck is that? It came many years ago when I was flying home from the US Open, and a friend of mine, Jennifer LaCour, had just written her book, The History of Pickleball. And then I went to go look at the founders and how it started on Bainbridge Island and how they took a badminton court and lowered the net and played with family and friends. And it said that on his spare time, they would make paddles in his garage and they would take plywood and just cut them. And I said, aha, now I know why pickleball paddles are all squares and rectangles. It's because the founder cut them out of plywood in his garage, and it's much easier to do a square or a rectangle than any other shapes, because it had always bothered me that pickleball paddles were rectangles. And in every other sport with a racket, the shape is influenced by the sport you play, but in pickleball it was backwards. The sport was influenced by the shape. So I said there's something here, and then through research and finding why sweet spots are where they are, it just came to me to make sense that every paddle should be widest at the sweet spot, and the shapes of a paddle should accentuate the feelings and characteristics that are most important to a player. As you know, sweet spot has been very subjective through the years. Everyone brags their sweet spot is bigger and mine is better, whatever. So I said, I'm going to build a paddle that proves it objectively, testing it, finding a way to do it. So if you increase the size of the sweet spot, you're going to limit the twist that the paddle has in your hand. So to the player, an off-center hit is still going to feel like it's in the sweet spot because the paddle's not going to twist. So why not take materials and impregnate the cells of the paddle before you put the edge guard on both sides of the sweet spot. So one side is pushing left, one side is pushing right, so the sweet spot becomes wider. And we do it on a paddle that's widest at the equator anyway. And it comes out to have this amazing twist weight, which is exactly what I set out to do when we designed this paddle.
Yeah, I mean, you really feel that when you play this thing on court. It feels like it's hard to miss the sweet spot. While the forgiveness of this is awesome for beginners, it has enough power to compete at a pretty high level. I mean, this thing launches the ball, and having that large sweet spot keeps it really controllable. And those aren't two things you always see together. How did you make this paddle so powerful?
Well, long story, we did a lot of experimenting. I wasn't going to launch until I had what I wanted. So what we did was we sourced materials and cores from a bunch of different factories around the world and in China, and we sourced cores from the people that make them here in the United States. We have an engineer who's a partner in the company that is very technically oriented, and so he had different types of foams, high density foams, low density foams, weighted materials, all kinds of stuff. And he put his mind to work and literally made, I'll say 30 different samples of this shape, the Rhapsody, all with different materials placed in different places for what the engineer thought was great. And then he wrote down everything he did to every paddle, numbered every paddle, blind tested, gave me on a court with some of my pros at Bobby Riggs as much time as I needed, and we play tested every single paddle, not knowing what was inside or how he did it. And then all of us agreed on which paddle played the best and had all the characteristics that we wanted in a paddle. And then I got the paddle and tore the number off and said, it's number 27. And then he says, okay, that's the one, and here's how we did it, and here's the materials, and here's how it was done. And then that became our paddle. So the test was done with our pros, finding out which one feels the best, is most lively, most control, just had a beautiful sensation when you hit the ball, and that's the one we went with.
Wow. That's some real R&D. I love that there are that many prototypes,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah,
finished product.
I'm going to throw in something, even though you didn't ask me the
I
question.
love it. I love it. Bring it on.
There's a friend of mine makes another paddle, great paddle company, but since it's not his interview, I'm not going to say the name of the company. But there's only two owners and manufacturers of pickleball paddles in the world that have both been national and U.S. Open champions, and they actually own, make, and design paddles as national and U.S. Open champions. And Avoura is one of them, and the other guy, he knows who. If he watches this interview, he'll know who I'm talking
I
about.
love it. I'm sure some
That
people in
just
the comments will figure it out.
it just means we're real pickleball people. We play the game like crazy. We're not just a company jumping in on the growth of this new sport trying to make a buck. We've been in it for a long time.
So it is somewhat of a unique shape, this Rhapsody. What made you settle on what I would call like the wide body shape? And can we expect to see any different shapes coming from Avora in the near future?
Uh, what we did with that shape is we wanted to stamp our foot on the ground and say we are the company that makes paddles like this. And I have shapes that are uh, far too scary to introduce and launch. It'll just scare the public away. I've showed some of them over the last year and a half to John Cowley, confidential, and John being my pickleball friend and legend in the sport of pickleball forever, he has kept to his word and saved them between myself and him. So we went with a paddle that shows our concept but isn't overly scary to the public so that they can dive into a paddle and enjoy the benefits right away without thinking that they're playing with something completely odd.
Yeah, different, but incredibly approachable is a way that I would describe the Rhapsody. And I just don't want to give this thing up. Another big detail here is these are all made in the United States.
Correct.
Was that pretty important to you from the onset?
Well, it was important basically because the feedback you can get from the testing we did to making them is instantaneous. I test the paddles at my club, drive a half hour away to our warehouse, inform everyone of what's happening and how it's going. So the making and rendering of new parts and applications is instantaneous as opposed to the process of doing everything overseas. So that was very important to us to do it, right in the backyard. And we know launching a new brand that we might get feedback that goes this way. Some people might want to see this. Some people might say, "Hey, Steve, can you do this?" And the answer is, "Yeah, I'll do it tomorrow." So was very important to us to see how the market reacts and the direction we want to take and the feedback from the customers.
Yeah, well said. you touched on this just briefly, and I wanted to ask you more specifically about it, on what exactly is going on underneath the edge guard that makes this different. You've done something different when it comes to perimeter weighting than we've seen from
Anyone.
anyone. Exactly.
Well, it goes like this. When you make shapes, the laser cutting of the paddles, you forcibly leave in the panel a lot of open cells that surround the perimeter of the paddle. So in those open cells, we spend a lot of time experimenting with different types of materials around the sweet spot that would enhance the way it plays. And like I said earlier, from high density foams to low density foams. We ended up coming through experimenting with a type of gel that, when it's placed into the cells of the paddle, it seeps into the cells and stays there, but it also doesn't harden into a glue. It stays quasi gel like. And then we added various metals to the gel to make it a little bit heavier where we wanted it, to make the sweet spot even wider. And after we do all that, then we put the edge guard on, and the paddle's done. So the construction of the paddle, and what people say is a Gen 1, which I think is a great paddle, that particular construction type allows experimenting with the inside of the paddle before you put the edge guard on. And the thermoform paddles can't do that. The one-piece paddles can't do that. It rolls off the production line, and it is what it is. Whereas we have the ability to tinker with everything and custom make it to make it just right. So that's why we went with the construction we did.
I love that you're a champion for what people would call the Gen 1 build. I would call it like the classic original build, and a lot more effort than most companies put into a paddle build, thermoformed or not. So hats off to y'all
Yeah,
for
yeah.
doing it the hard
I
way.
personally think that paddle should be a Gen 5.
I love it. Well, we can coin it right
Yeah,
here.
there we go.
Why not? Well, I love to hear that. I want to be cognizant of your time. The Rhapsody is phenomenal, but Avoura's not just doing paddles. I know you already have an active YouTube channel before your paddles even launched, and there's even tips and help for those drilling on there. Is that kind of a key part of who the company is?
Well, yeah, we just want to help pickleball and help promote pickleball. And 6 months ago, we did a series of videos, and instead of trying to sell them or market them as a course and make money, we said, we're going to take these videos, give the best instruction we can with my wife, the Hall of Famer, my son, and myself, and just give them away. Let people see the drills by us as the founders and designers of the paddles. I mean, you're not going to see, pick your top 10 brands. You're not going to see the owners of those brands doing instructional videos. They just can't do it, but we can. So that's why we did that.
Awesome. Well, you're definitely walking the walk, you and your family, with the launch of this and a whole new brand.
Okay, one more thing I'm going to add, though, we didn't touch on. And if you've looked at the YouTube channel, you may have seen it already. We also have another patent pending, and that's with the way we affix the edge guard to the handle. So if any other paddle you can grab off your wall back there, or go into the warehouse and pull one out, you'll see the edge guard wrap around the paddle, down the hips and down the handle where it's glued and taped on. And that adds I would say, a janky, disjointed feeling to the handle, because the handle is not just the handle, but it's where everyone tries to hide the edge guard. So we have been able to pin the edge guard in and fix it right at the top, so that the entire handle is one uniform feel from the bottom to the top. So although the handle of the Rhapsody is not the longest handle in the market, we like to say it's the longest usable handle in the market.
Yeah, it's like there's no wasted space when it gets to the top. It's not clunky. You could hold it all the way to the top. I use a two-handed backhand and didn't have a problem with it. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with the Rhapsody or Avoura?
Uh, I think that's it. I can't wait to use it in my next tournament. I mean, I've been been waiting for the launch to get it out there, and I'm excited to get started using it.
That's so awesome. Well, we are stoked to be able to launch it on pickleballcentral.com, where you'll be able to find the Avoura Rhapsody 13. You can also check out Avoura's YouTube channel, where you'll find some great instructional content, along with Steve walking you through the exact build of the paddle itself with some great video to go along with it. Once again, Steve, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you, Joseph. Enjoyed it.